Shalom, friends. This is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet, www.lovingkindness.co. Welcome to another Shiur in Tanya, the book of the average men, as we see in front of us on the screen, written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shear of Liadi, who lived from 1745 to 1812. Our subject at the moment, we're up to chapter 11. We concluded chapter 10 last week, and there we discussed the issue of the Tzaddik. Again, for those who might be finding this shiur online and might have missed out on the previous shiurim, to put things into perspective, there are three categories of quality of soul that enter into this world. One who is called the Tzaddik, one who is called the Rasha, and one who is called the Beinoni, if we can say it in this way. And the Tzaddik is basically a person who is on such a level of goodness in that everything that he does is good. He thinks good, he speaks good, he does good. The Rasha, on the other hand, finds himself with other types of thoughts on the opposite scale. And of course, the Beinoni is somebody who, as we're going to learn about shortly, when we finish this chapter, in other words, we're going to learn about a person who is really living his life as if he were a tzaddik, but he's not really a tzaddik. And that's why this book is called the Sefer Shel Beinonim. It's the book of the Beinonim, because it applies to the majority of people in the world who have the opportunity to become tzaddikim, but at least if they can't become tzaddikim, they can work on themselves to become Beinonim at the very least. But to get themselves out of the rut of being chained down into the way of the Rasha, of the evil person. Now, last week we spoke about the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik is the righteous person, and there were two qualities, two types of Tzaddikim. One type of Tzaddik who ruled completely over his heart in such a way that he had completely removed any trace of evil from the heart and had transformed it into good. Because within the heart, there are two ventricles, a right ventricle and a left ventricle. Now, the right ventricle is the seat of the godly part of the soul, and the left ventricle is the seat of the animalistic part of the soul, where the blood is situated. Now, the tzaddik, who is completely in a level of tzaddik amur, not only is it that he has nothing of bad that exists in that left ventricle, but he has even transformed any aspect of evil into goodness. The second type of tzaddik has a minute amount of evil that still rests within that part of the heart. It never manifests itself, of course, and it's irrelevant to his general divine worship. But the point of the matter is that he has not yet transformed it into goods, and there's still work that needs to be done. He is the tzaddik she'enu gamur, the tzaddik who is not completely righteous. He's not completely a tzaddik. Now, our chapter 11, is going to take us on a tour of the nature of the soul of the Rasha, of the evil person. And the Alter Rebbe begins with the following idea. The Alter Rebbe says, this corresponds to that. Quoting the pasuk from the book of Kohelet, written by Shlomo HaMelech, he says that everything has a corresponding thing directly related to it. Meaning to say, when God created the world, there are two aspects to every single thing in creation which have a corresponding aspect on its opposite side. To the degree of good, you will find also the degree of bad. Everything is corresponding. To the degree that a person has greatness to him, to that degree he also has the potential to fall apart. And of course, to the degree that he has the ability to fall apart, he has the ability to ascend in greatness. Everything is opposite. So we spoke about the tzaddik v'tov lo, tzaddik v'ra lo, the tzaddik who has the good completely subjugated the good to him, to his great level of goodness, and the tzaddik she'enu gamur, who is not complete, is a person who the aspect of good has not yet been completely subjugated to him. There is still an aspect of evil that rests in him. But now, as I said before, that of course is irrelevant in terms of his divine worship, in which he serves God on a level of goodness completely. It's just that he hasn't converted it he hasn't converted the bad into the good. That is that particular tzaddik. Now, everything is opposite. And therefore, just as we spoke about the concept of the tzaddik viralo, that there is a tzaddik who has not yet subjugated all of this evil to himself into the aspect of good and transformed it into good, there is a corresponding person on the opposite side. This is the quality of the person who is called Rasha v'tovlo. He is an evil person, but he has the good which is subjugated to him, which means to say that in general, he is on the category of evil, but he gets these spurts whereby the good is subjugated to him. And he is opposite to the aspect of the tzaddik who has this aspect of bad towards him. What does that mean? This means to say, when you speak about this evil person, v'tovlo, that he has good to him, what does that mean? It means that the good in his soul, in the godly soul, shebamocho, which is in his head, the godly soul is sitting in the head of the person, and this also rests in the right hand, the right side, the right ventricle in his heart, is kafuf ubatel, is subjugated and nullified legabe hara, to the evil mehaklipa, of the shell, of the husk, of the aspect of evil, of the peel, of this aspect of bad, shebekalal hasmani. In other words, the good is subjugated to the bad. The bad is still overwhelming, but he has this good aspect which is kind of minute in comparison to the overwhelming evil, shebechalal asmali, which is resting in the left ventricle of the heart. And he says that this is divided up also into myriads of levels, different degrees of levels of how much bad there is to the good, how much good there is to the bad, whichever direction we're taking, as we're going to see in a few minutes. Chalukot be'inyan kamos ve'echos, everything is divided up in the matter of its quantity and its quality, to the degree how much is it, and of course to the degree of the quality of how it manifests itself. When we speak about the nullification and the subjugation of the good to the bad, God forbid, to what degree is a person's good quality subjugated to the bad, which means that the bad manifests itself, and then the good comes out only in small quantities or bigger quantities. Yesh mi, there is a person, that the subjugation and the nullification by him is of the smallest amount. And even this that we speak about, that he has this goodness in him, it doesn't happen often, and it doesn't happen frequently, but rather this occurs at distant times, infrequent times. Mitkaber hara alatov, where what happens to this fellow is that the evil that he has strengthens itself over the good. So we have one type of an evil person whereby we can have a situation whereby the evil becomes subjugated, meaning this evil is strengthening itself over the good, but only infrequently. The Koveshes Ha'ir Ketana, and it conquers the small city. Remember from what we learned before, that we spoke about the body. The Alter Rebbe described to us that the body is comparable to a small city, and the limbs are comparable to the inhabitants of the city. And the city is, at this point in time, up for grabs. And there are two big kings that are fighting over the up for grabs city. And the one king is a good king, and the other king is an evil king. As we said before, imagine, for example, on one shoulder, there is this creature that looks like a creature with a halo on top of his head. He's shining. And there's another creature on the other side of the person, on the other side of the other shoulder, and he consists of a red creature, and he's holding a fork in his hand, and he's got a long tail. Well, I'm just making up this idea just to put into perspective of what we're dealing with. We have two kings, and each of them has a crown on their heads. And basically, both of them are fighting over the city, that the inhabitants of the city should all conform to their particular rules. So what happens in this particular case is you have this evil king and the good king in this fight, and it happens that only infrequently does the bad overrule the good and take over the power of the city. So once in a while, he comes along and he commits a particular avera in a small manner, as he said here, which of course is the body. But it doesn't take over the entire existence, but it's just a little bit. That it removes itself. This person is going to turn himself over to its desires, to its implications, to whatever it wants, its instructions. And becomes for him, the body becomes for this soul, meaning that the person's involved in this fight, and becomes for him like a chariot and a garment, in order to be enclosed within it. One of the three garments, as we spoke about before. What were the three garments? Remember, we spoke about this idea right at the beginning, and that was really the whole introduction of the Tanya, that we were learning about the idea that every single soul has 10 soul powers. And that's how it's expressing itself with those particular powers. Now, in addition to the soul powers that it also has garments. And these garments are the thought, speech, and action that a person engages in which he takes those 10 soul powers and he uses them in a particular way related to the particular garments. In this particular instance, the bad rules over the good and takes over, as the king takes over the inhabitants of the city, and he causes the inhabitants of the city to manifest themselves, to listen to his wishes, so that it should act out in a particular direction relative to one of these three garments. Tahayinu, which means to say, or b'ma'aseh levad, or the person will be overwhelmed with this evil in action only, which we could say is ultimately, if we're going to talk about aveiras, so at least he did the aveira and it's finished with. La'asot aveiros kalot. And what does he do? He does some lat aveiras, v'lo chamurot, and not some really bad things. The aveira that he does is something which, in Torah terms, would be considered something simple and light. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. Or bedibur. Or it could be that a person commits the aveira through speech, one of the other garments, levad, by itself. Lidaber avak lashon hara. Look at the way that the Alter Rebbe describes the aveira that a person's committing. First of all, he spoke about doing an action which he says is a light action, whatever you call that in terms of Torah explanation. And then we talk about the idea of speaking something which would be forbidden. And here he doesn't speak about an idea of lashon hara, which everybody agrees is forbidden, but he speaks about the concept of avak lashon hara, something that borders on lashon hara. For example, a person starts talking and he doesn't speak specifically about a person doing certain things, but he kind of makes a suggestive comment that if anybody in the room hears the comment, he might kind of latch on to what the conversation is all about and where it's going. And he'll say, oh yes, isn't that true about so-and-so that did such and such? But the truth of the matter is that the first person who brought up the discussion spoke no lashon hara whatsoever. All he did was make a particular comment which was kind of suggestive. But the actual speech itself was not a forbidden speech. So this is called avak lashon hara. And it could be that this particular person commits the sin, which is a low level of sin on the level of speech. V'leitzanut, and frivolity, and joking around, ukahai gavna, all sorts of jokes, whatever it is that he's doing and he's speaking about. So these are light aveiras in the realm of speech, whereby, leitzanut, he's joking around. He shouldn't be wasting his words. He shouldn't be talking nonsense. He should be speaking about Torah, but instead he uses his mouth to speak about silly things. Well, it might not necessarily be a strong, big Aveira that he did, but it borders on the side of Aveiras with speech. And therefore, he is liable to a certain degree. We see this person that what's happening to him is that he's committing certain Aveiras on a very light level, whereby the bad manifests itself over this person infrequently, in small matters, or or in his thoughts only. What does that mean? And he brings down over here that these are thoughts of sin, which are even worse than sin itself. He brings that down as a point because it's very important to remember that one's thoughts are closest to one's soul, whereas one's body is furthest away from who one really is. When we leave this world, we're going to leave our bodies behind. That's not who we are. So we think about it. When a person commits an Aveira with his body, it's far removed from who he really is as a soul. But if a person commits an Aveira within his thoughts, this is closest to the nature of the essence of his soul. This means to say that when a person engages himself in thinking about Aveiras, he actually does worse to his soul than if he commits the Aveira itself. This does not mean that anybody is giving permission for people to go commit an Aveira. What it means is that a person should be aware that even if he commits an Aveira in his thoughts, he should be aware that this is a serious offense, and even more so, that the Aveira is so bad that it is considered even worse than a sin that is related to action itself. V'gam, likewise, if he doesn't think about an Aveira to do it, which means to say he's not really going to contemplate that he's going to do the Aveira, but rather he's just thinking about the Aveira in his mind. Let's say, for example, a person has a dislike for an individual, and he says, I could really give this fellow a bad name, God forbid. I could say all these nasty things about him, or whatever it is. He gets himself all caught up in his thoughts, but he knows he'd never really do the Aveira. So it's not for him. He'd never do such a thing. Here's another example that the Alter Rebbe gives. A person thinks about the matter of the intimacy between a male and a female in the world, or he thinks about it in a general way. However you want to say it over at this point in time, he begins to imagine in his mind a scene between a particular man and woman, or perhaps he's in the scene itself, and he begins to imagine what this particular thing is that gives him great pleasure. But ultimately, he knows he'd never really do the Aveira, but rather he gets caught up in the thoughts of the Aveira. And even though he doesn't commit the Aveira, he is still liable for the thoughts of the Aveira. She'oiver al azharas haTorah, a person who does this is going to transgress against the warning of the Torah, which says in Gemara Sanhedrin, Daf Chaf Amud Beis, over there it says, V'nishmarta mikol davar ra. You should guard yourself from every bad thing. What does it mean to guard oneself from every bad thing? Shelo yaher bayom, a person should not think in the daytime about X, Y, Z, meaning the theme that we're talking about, in order ultimately that he doesn't come to commit an Aveira in the nighttime. And that means even by himself, that something happens while he was sleeping, he had a particular dream, and this caused something to happen. This is what we mean over here, that a person shouldn't think certain things in the daytime in order that he won't come to commit the Aveira at the nighttime, even if it's something that he wasn't intentionally thinking about doing, but nevertheless, that particular thing happens. So we see over here examples of how the bad can manifest itself over a person's body, take over. The king is winning. The bad king is winning this battle, taking over the rulership of the body, even temporarily, even in simple things like just a thought of an Aveira. But it doesn't matter, because these things are on the side of negativity. They're on the side of bad, which a person should refrain from engaging in. So in this case, when a person does these things, of course, he is certainly classified in the full sense of the word as a Rasha, as an evil person. Again, we don't mean to say that the person is evil. You know, how people talk, he's an evil person because he simply had a bad thought. That's not what we mean. We mean the category of soul level that the person is working on is what's called Rasha, evil. Of course, when it comes to Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur, and the person is judged by God, of course, if his mitzvahs, his merits outweigh his aveiros, he'll be considered a tzaddik, and he will be written down and sealed in the book of life, because indeed he is a tzaddik. The majority of what he does is good, and the minority of what he does is bad. But the Alter Rebbe is coming to teach us in the book of Tanya, not what we think about as a colloquial expression of who is a tzaddik and who is a rasha, who is righteous and who is evil, who is considered good and who is considered bad. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about the soul level of a person. And the soul level that we're speaking about here is when a person engages in a bad action that goes against the Torah's will, when a person speaks words that are negative and against the Torah, even if they just be avak lashon hara, even if it's just bordering, it smacks of lashon hara, but it's not even lashon hara. Even if he thinks an aveira that he would never commit, at that point in time, the fellow is called a rasha. Of course, when he does good, he's called a tzaddik. But the point of the matter is, on the level of soul level, the person is operating on the level of rasha, as an evil person. Or here's another example. A person finds himself with a fitting time where he could sit and study Torah. Everybody knows this. It's not so difficult to think about. Lunch is finished. We had a great meal. It's going to be another hour or two before we have to go back to some activity that we have to do. Half an hour. Perhaps it's a Sunday and we're not even working. And we've had a good breakfast. And now the day begins and we don't have much ahead of us in terms of work activity. And we think, well, what should we do with our day? Let's go and sit in the garden and just sit around and enjoy the sun. And again, nobody says one is doing anything wrong because one is sitting in the sun. However, perhaps this is what is called a time which is suitable to occupy oneself in Torah. And this is the idea of what's called bittul Torah, where a person is wasting his time when instead he could be sitting and studying Torah. He is not actively involved in an aveira. God forbid. He's sitting and he's enjoying the sun outside. Perhaps he's even praising God for the warmth that he's receiving. He's doing some good things. We're not criticizing him for his particular action. He didn't do anything constructively or destructively wrong. Rather, what he does is he just simply lets the time go by instead of occupying himself in Torah. Of course, we only have a certain amount of time in this world. And so therefore, as the clock continues to tick, we have to say to ourselves, are we using this time correctly or are we wasting it? The time will never come back again. Imagine, for example, a person who has to do a course at university. He's going to become a doctor, where he has to study a great amount of material. And he's got to go through 6 years of study, 8 years of study, whatever it might be. And they tell him in medical school that the truth of the matter is that not only will he have to attend classes, but when he goes home each day, he'll need to put in at least 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours of study each day before he returns back to medical school the next day. And they tell him, you should know as you get into the more advanced levels, the more advanced years of your medical study, that you'll have to be attending practical activities a lot more. You'll have to be taken into the hospital where you'll have to spend evenings involved in practicing what it is that you learn, and you'll be taught the practical work, of course. Now imagine this fellow says, you know, I'm only going to go to university for 5 hours of the day or 6 hours, whatever it's going to be, however long I have to learn at university, 8 hours of the day. And when I come back home, I'm going to treat myself to a good supper. And then afterwards, I'm going to just relax, watch some TV. I'm going to just enjoy the evening and let the day go by. I won't hurt anybody. Well, he could live a life like that if he wants to. But there's no saying whether or not he'll make it to the first of the class the first person, meaning the best. And there's no saying whether or not he'll make it through medical school altogether. He has to be careful. He's chosen a path in which he's going to have to put in a lot of effort. He's going to have to study. He's going to put in extra hours. What's a pity if he gives in to his inclination that will keep him away from his studies just because he feels he'd like to enjoy the warm day outside in the sun. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, he's at university, and when he tells the lecturer that he just spent the day enjoying the sun, he's not going to be reprimanded. I mean, did he get his work done? Did he do the homework? Does he know what's going on? Perhaps he should have learned a bit more ahead and kept himself ahead of the pack, learned a little bit more than everybody else. But he did what he was supposed to do, didn't he? But if he didn't do what he was supposed to do, the lecturer is going to come down hard on him. Look here, sir, you have come through, or man, you have come through to this, to be a doctor over here. You are taken in at this prestigious university, and you spent the day simply in the sun, wasting the day. You should have rather attended to the studies that you had to do, learned a bit more, learned it better. So too, the soul in this world is put here only for a certain amount of time. And God is saying to each one of us, you need to put in the effort to do work. You need to take care of the avoida, of studying Torah and the fulfillment of mitzvot. Because once the time is gone, it's finished. What were you doing with your time? Now here's the thing. Here we're sitting and we're learning a shiur together. Me, together with you. We're all learning it together. When we arrive at our destination after 120 years, and God says, well, what did you do with your life? This is going to be an hour on the record where we will all be able to say, at least we put in the effort to study Torah. We focused on you, God. We focused on Torah. We focused on the soul. We focused on the important things to grow as a Jew. We used this hour successfully. Here is the angel protecting us as we sit and we study the shiur together. But when we finish the shiur, and it's a lovely warm day outside, it's summer, and we go and we sit on the balcony and we say, what a wonderful day. I think I'll just keep to enjoying the rest of the day in the warm sun. God will say, well, wasn't that a fitting time that you could have studied Torah? He'll say, but I did study some Torah. And God will say, yes, to that hour that you studied, you are credited. You did well. But just like the fellow at university, the student at university, he has to be careful. His course ahead of him is a big course. He's got a long way to go. He's got some intensive study he's got to get through. The lecturer is not going to be pleased when he finds out that the fellow had enough time to study the material and do well, and he wasted that time. Perhaps he'll even get through, but he won't be an outstanding doctor because he wasted the hours that he could have put in to becoming an outstanding doctor. He wasted it on the warmth of the sun. This is called bittul Torah. That's how we refer to it with regards to the study of Torah. Or shehisha asa kosher la'asok b'Torah. This is an aveira. It was a time that was fitting for him to study Torah. V'hu mefaneh libo levatala. And simply, what does he do? He turns his heart to wasted things, to things of a nature that they're just a waste of time. They're bittul, but they're just a waste of time. Kiditanan ba'avot, as it's taught in Pirkei Avot, it says over there in Perek Gimel, Mishnah Dalet, in the book of the Mishnahs of ethics of our sages, or ethics of our fathers, in the book of fathers, Mishnah Avot, Hanei or Balayla, a person who stays awake at night. We know what that can do. Sometimes it's 8 o'clock now, it's 9 o'clock, and there's not much to do for the rest of the evening. We think to ourselves, how will we spend the rest of the evening? If a person is genuinely tired, he needs to get some sleep. But if it's the evening and he feels like, I can't quite get to sleep yet, and he says, you know what, I'll just pass the time by until it's 11 o'clock. And then when I feel tired, then I'll go to sleep. And the person turns his heart to idle matters. So then chayav misa, that person is really deserving, basically, of the death penalty. A person who is just going to turn his attention to vanity when he had the opportunity to sit and study Torah, he's going to be liable for the time that he wastes where he could have engaged in the study of Torah instead of just letting the evening pass by. Everybody knows how easy it is. It's the evening. A person comes back from having worked the whole day. He feels tired. She feels tired. And now that the work is over, depending on a person's lifestyle, of course, we're not speaking about every single person. We're not generalizing. But a person knows himself. And if indeed after supper he ate well, he feels full, and he says to himself, I could still do with another hour or two before I go to sleep. And instead of using that time for the study of Torah, where he can get close to Hashem and fulfill his role in the world, or involve himself in mitzvah performance, perhaps somebody needs his assistance, perhaps he can give charity to a few people, and he can sit on the computer, he can sit online even, and find who the charities, who are the people that need assistance, and he clicks a few buttons and he helps people. At the click of a button, he just simply clicks on the button, he's able to make the difference in the life of another individual who's 5,000 miles away from him, just by clicking there. And he doesn't waste the evening away. He does mitzvot, even from the comfort of a comfortable chair in front of a computer screen. Or alternatively, he's watching a shiur like this one, and he's listening, and he's learning, and he's growing. That's what we're here in the world for. Because in one of these things, any of these type of things similar to this, whatever we're speaking about, Nikra Rasha, a person is called evil ba'esahi at that time. Remember, we don't mean to say that the person is really an evil person, but he has at that point in time the category and the quality of being called an evil person. We don't mean to say he's bad. The quality of his soul is on the soul level at that point in time of the type of person who's called Rasha. When we are not doing what we should, we're called Rasha. When we are doing what we should, we're called Tzaddik. Well, where are we holding? Are we the Tzaddik? Or are we the Rasha? Well, of course, it all depends on how often these moments come up. To the degree that the moments of evil enter into our lives, that we feel we have to attach ourselves to that evil, to that degree, we are Rishayim. And to the degree that we are going to involve ourselves in good and take over the evil and turn that evil into good, we're going to be called Tzaddikim. But you see, the catch is, if we are more or less constantly on this level of doing bad relative to our different garments, thought, speech, and action, we're going to be into this category of Rasha for the majority of our time, says the Alter Rebbe. We're not judging the person as a good person or as a bad person. We're judging him in terms of his category of soul. What we mean is that the evil in his soul, it strengthens itself over the person, or mislabesh begufo, and it encloses his body, or and it makes him commit a sin, and it makes him impure. That's what we're speaking about. At those points in time, even a person is just sitting around at night. He finished a hard day of work. He's done well. Nobody's criticizing him. Everybody has to earn a living. He went to work. He did what he had to do. Nobody's criticizing him. He comes home. He needs supper. Fantastic. He has a good meal. He makes his brachot. But now it's 9 o'clock or 8:30, and he says to himself, I'll only be going to sleep at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, or certainly later. And he says to himself, well, it's been such a hard day at work. I think I'll take time out. I think it's a good movie. Maybe there's somebody I need to speak to on the phone and just simply pass the time by. I won't speak any lashon hara, God forbid. But I'll just contact a few friends and say, how's it going? What's happening? How are things with you? Without having any interest, just to simply pass the time by. Not to have any active interest. Of course, if he had active interest, that's a different story. He uses the opportunity to do a mitzvah. How are you? Do you need any assistance? Are you okay? It's a time now, people are more alone than they've been in before, months ago, before the virus, and a person wants to give a call to his friend. How are you? I know that you live by yourself. Is everything okay with you? Are you taken care of? Do you feel strong in yourself? Is there anything I can do to help you? And an hour goes by and he's given this person strength. Of course, he fulfilled the requirements of a mitzvah, he's loving his fellow Jew as himself, he's doing all sorts of good things. But if he just picks up the phone and he talks to his friends, how are things going? What's the weather like? Interesting, I haven't spoken to you for weeks now. What are we going to speak about? The latest this, the latest that. He wastes the time. In that instance, all that he does to himself is he allows the evil in his soul to manifest, to enclose itself within his body and cause him ultimately to sin and to make him impure. Afterwards, after this whole episode has happened and he's finished with it, suddenly he gets strengthened. The good in him, in his godly soul, strengthens himself. Now the person regrets it. Now he thinks about it. Wasn't that a little bit of avak lashon hara I was speaking on the phone? I really know that the words that I said could have caused my friend to start speaking very badly about the fellow that I was talking about and thinking about as I was saying that. I didn't realize that I was involved. I should have used my time better. What a waste of my time. And now the fellow begins to request for forgiveness. Mechila, slika, different expressions of forgiveness from God. He says to God, Hashem, forgive me for wasting that time. Forgive me for speaking that way. Forgive me for the thoughts I had. Forgive me for the action that I did. I really shouldn't have gone in that direction. Hashem yislach lo. Hashem will forgive him. Then and there, right on the spot, Hashem will forgive the person. Im shav b'teshuva haruya. If a person does teshuva in a fitting way, God will forgive him immediately. Al pi atzatz chachamenu zal, in accordance with the advice of our sages, who say bishloisha chilukei kapara shehaya Rabbi Yishmael doresh, that Rabbi Yishmael expounded on the three types of aveira that a person can commit, as is brought down in another place. I'll just end off very briefly with these three types of aveiras and the idea of doing teshuvah. What happens is the following. If a person commits a person committed a sin against a positive mitzvah, for example, a man does not wear tefillin. Says Rabbi Yishmael, how does he get kapara? How does he do atonement for the fact that he never put tefillin on? He's 60 years old. He never put tefillin on a day in his life. God forbid. How does he do teshuvah? He says to God, I'm really sorry that I didn't put tefillin on. So God says, that's all right. Don't worry about it. And he carries on his life. Is that how he does teshuvah? No. The moment that he says sorry and he regrets it and he says, I'm not going to do this again. And he puts the tefillin on, and from that day onwards, he puts the tefillin on, immediately he is forgiven from the fact that he didn't put the tefillin on from before. That does not mean that there is something still lacking in him and something lacking in the world. Could be, but he's forgiven. He still could have brought more light to the world, which is unfortunately lost because he didn't put the tefillin on during all those years that he was growing up. But in terms of forgiveness, God forgives him, says Rabbi Yishmael, because at this point in time, he has done teshuvah. And he's accepted upon himself that now he is putting tefillin on, and God says, okay, I forgive him. The second type of sin is against a negative aveira. In other words, he does something negative that he shouldn't have done. In a general sense, God says, when does he get forgiveness? He gets forgiveness after doing the required teshuvah, and then Yom Kippur comes along. That's what Yom Kippur is for. Each year, when Yom Kippur comes along, it brings atonement for all of those negative things that we did wrong and that now we're doing teshuvah on. And the third category that we do teshuvah on is something that involves chariots. A person can be cut off spiritually, whatever this means exactly. I don't know what it means. I'm not sure if anybody can define exactly what is karet. But the point of the matter is, how does a person do teshuvah? He does his ordinary teshuvah as he should. God, I'm so sorry for committing this particular aveira. What did I do wrong? I ate chometz on Pesach when I should have only had matzah. Forbidden to eat chometz. And he says, I really regret it. And of course, in the future, he never does this aveira again. God says, okay, that's all is well and good. But how do we do atonement for this? We do atonement through what you have to do as teshuvah. We do atonement through Yom Kippur, must come around. And we do atonement for the fact that you have to get a certain measure of kapara. a certain measure of yisurim, of afflictions. And when the person experiences those afflictions, that together with Yom Kippur and his teshuvah atones for the thing that he did wrong, which means to say that God ultimately will forgive a person practically for anything that he does wrong. And as long as he does the teshuvah as he should do it, as Rabbi Ishmael brings down, as we should do teshuvah, a person can be forgiven for anything. Ultimately, he still committed the Aveira, and he was still a Rasha at that point in time. But then he regrets it, and he does his teshuvah, and he moves on ahead. What now? Where does this leave this person? Because he did the teshuvah, he moves on. Is he now still considered to be a Rasha? We'll have to see in the next lesson and so on exactly what happens to this particular person on his journey after teshuvah, what becomes of him. But in the meantime, we're closing off for today's shiur, and I thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet. My site is at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed the shiur, please click on the like button in YouTube. You can see there's a like button. Click on the video, say, I've really enjoyed your shiur. Thank you very much. Make a positive comment. Share it with your friends and family, because we're trying the best we can to get people attracted to the Torah that we're teaching. And of course, subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Otherwise, you won't know that the shiurim are coming out. If you'd like to study Torah together with me in a private shiur or join us in one of these shiurim, please be in touch. I'd be delighted to welcome you aboard and take part in these shiurim. So if you would, if there's anything else I can help you with, please be in touch with me via my website. And of course, I would be delighted to be in touch with you. In the meantime, I wish you everything of the best. And I look forward to another shiur in Tanya with you and another shiur in whatever it is that we're learning. In the meantime, I say that I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.